record button on my screen. Excellent. Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this revision session for the Level 3 AAT Advanced Synoptic. I'm just going to stop sharing that screen because I need to share with you another screen, which are the spreadsheet tasks we are specifically going to be looking at this evening. So, as always in these revision sessions, these are tasks that we at First Intuition have created. I've put both of these together for classes that I've taught previously, preparing our students for their Advanced Synoptic. They are not directly from the AAT. They are not, therefore, a direct replication of the assessment. The things you might get in the assessment will look and feel slightly different to this. But as I always say, they give us a good chance to think about some of the prior knowledge. We're going to be recapping tonight some of the stuff that you will have seen in management accounting costing, but also a chance to develop some of the spreadsheet practical skills that you need to demonstrate, because we do know in your Advanced Synoptic assessment, the second half of the exam, or actually it's more than half for the time requirement, but the second part of the exam will see you needing to complete 2 spreadsheet tasks and making sure that they are uploaded. So hopefully you've either got access to it or you can watch along on the screen or watch the recording, but we will jump straight in and have a look at our first spreadsheet task for this evening. So we've been presented, we've got a worksheet. Just remember the terminology when the assessor, the examiner, talks about a workbook. A workbook is the whole Excel file. So that's the whole file that you can save. The worksheets are these tabs along the bottom. So we've got 2 worksheets initially, one branded task 1 and another one headed up task 2. And if we're asked to insert a new worksheet, which we might be during the assessment, we would have to insert another tab and then use that blank tab to kind of build our spreadsheet up for the assessment. Cool. So we've then been given some information. It says you have been presented with the following fixed budget and actual cost. So remember, bit of management accounting costing recap here. A fixed budget would be set when? You can play along, either shout out at your screen if you're at home watching on the recording, or using the chat box. When would an organisation usually set their fixed budget? Any ideas, anybody? Shout at your computer, your laptop, your telly screen, or type into the chat box if you're joining me live this evening. Brilliant. We're getting some people saying start of the year or before the start of the year. Exactly right. The fixed budget is set at the start of the period. Now, obviously, that period will develop, and by the end of the period, we will have some actual results. So we have been given the numbers here for expenses. We've got some materials, some labour, some consumables, some energy, and some insurance. And then we've been given the budgeted numbers, and this would be the budget that the business set right at the start of the year. And then next to it, we've got some actual costs that the businesses have obviously recorded during the period. It tells us all costs are variable apart from insurance, which is fixed. So again, a bit of management accounting costing terminology there. If a cost is variable, the more we produce, the more that cost goes up. A variable cost is a pure per unit of production cost. And so the more units we produce, the more cost is going to go up. On the opposite side, it says insurance is fixed. What does that mean irrespective of the production volume? What will a fixed cost stay throughout the whole period, irrespective of how much we actually make or produce? Shout out at home or type into the chat box if you're joining me live this evening. Brilliant. It stays the same. It doesn't change. Fantastic. And it's worth just bearing that in mind with regards to how we're going to see these costs behave in a moment. Last bit of information we've got before we start getting into the requirements of this task. It says the budget was prepared based on 10,000 units of production. So that was the fixed budget. Right at the start of the period, they expected the business to make 10,000 units. We've now got to the end of the year and we know the actual units produced was 12,000. So my last question really on management accounting costing for this bit is to say, for us to make our budget more relevant to the actual, what have we now got to do to our fixed budget to make it on the same units as our actual? Shout out at home or type into the chat box. Brilliant. I can see everybody typing in at home live is saying flex it. We're going to have to flex this budget, presumably, but let's see how this task evolves and how we are asked to do it. So straight into the requirements now, and I've labeled them A, B, C, etc. So part A says insert a separate worksheet. Now, if you're asked to do that, a separate worksheet, we're going to have to put that into our spreadsheet. And so a worksheet, we can just use the buttons down here. If my spreadsheet's going to play ball with me, and it might be because I need to enable it for editing. Give me 1 second. Let me just, if ever you get this, this won't happen to you in the assessment, but if ever the spreadsheets I send out need enabling, you just need to kind of hit enable. Let me just reshare that with you, and hopefully now it should be able for me to enter stuff in there. Fantastic. So if ever you get that, I'm pretty convinced this won't happen to you in the assessment, but if ever any of the spreadsheets we send out don't let you type in to start with, you might just need to resave it or hit print and then enable editing, and it will let you then modify the spreadsheet. So part A says insert a separate worksheet. We see down here I've got a little plus button at the bottom here, and I can hit plus, and straight away it has now inserted a new blank worksheet. So I've got task 1 still there, but I've now got sheet 1 next to it that it's popped in. And if I wanted to, I can drag and drop those to kind of make them go in a particular order. It says, give this a heading of annual budget analysis in font size 16 and underline. So give this a heading of annual budget. I'm going to pop in here at the top, annual budget. And it tells us to make this font size 16 and underline. So there's a few ways you can do this in Excel. I can either right click and choose to format the cell. And then at that point, I can start changing things like the font over here, or you've got the icons up at the top here. So I just need to remind myself what we were asked to do. I'm needing to make it size 16 and to underline it. So up here, I can select underline, and I've now underlined my annual budget. And I can also change the font size here in the little drop down and make it size 16. Now, things like that sound pedantic, but I know that the assessors place as much marks and store on following those formatting instructions as they do for some of the more complicated areas of spreadsheets, such as the formulas that you might be asked to use. So don't get lazy in the assessment. If a question asks you to change to a particular font or size or make something bold or underlined, please, for goodness sake, do it, because all of those will be marks that the assessor can then award when they review your spreadsheet. Remember, at the end of your assessment, your spreadsheets get uploaded. They get uploaded, and the AAT assessors then actually look at those to mark your work. They see the real spreadsheets you've been working on. Right, so we've done B. We've given it the heading annual budget analysis, it said actually. So I'm actually just going to write another word there, analysis. We've made it size 16 and we have underlined it. Part C then, it says copy in the data for each expense budget and actual from the above. So this might be something they require you to do in the live assessment. Open up a new worksheet, but copy across information. So can we see I have just held my mouse over the cells I want to copy, and I want all of the expenses, the budget and the actual. So I'm holding my mouse down and I am highlighting all of those, which gives me the facility in a moment to then if I'm using my mouse correctly, and this is a problem using a laptop, right click on my mouse and then choose copy. And then I can come into my new worksheet and then hit paste. And I have now replicated that information. So being able to use copy and paste will help you because it will speed you up in the assessment, but it's also something they might want you to do to move information from one worksheet to another. So that was part C, copy in the data for each expense and actual from the above. Then we've got D. It says insert a column between the budget and the actual, include a heading flexed budget. So if we go back to the information we just copied across, I need to now insert a column. So I select in the column C here, and I've just clicked in that budget. If I right click, I can then choose insert in the drop down menu that appears. And so it's asking me what I want to insert. Well, I want to insert an entire column. If I hit OK, but what's it done? Who can see the mistake that I've made? What did it ask me to do by inserting a column? Well, they wanted the column between the two. So this is where, in the assessment, if things start going a bit wrong, just take a deep breath and try and regain your composure. I need to actually click in column E, don't I? And then right click and hit insert and then entire column. And I think sometimes students get so hung up on spreadsheets thinking I've got to be perfect that they don't realize what the AAT are trying to simulate in this exam is something along the lines of a real workplace environment you might be in. And Excel might be a little bit of trial and error. Yes, you should understand the functions and you should do your study and practice, but on the day of the assessment, you can still use a bit of trial and error. Just keep an eye on the clock and make sure you're not wasting loads of time, because it's very important that you have at least got both of the spreadsheets to a stage that you can upload. There's lots of ways to do it. Ellen's saying she could have just copied across that column that I got wrong. That would have worked. And remember, guys, they're not watching you do it. All they see is the final product. So how you actually get there is completely down to you. And with something like Excel, there are an inordinate ways that you can do the same kinds of stuff. Everybody knows all their own little ways. And so you need to practice for yourself. Make sure that you are comfortable. Martina's saying you could hit Control Plus. That works for some people. There are lots of ways you can do insert columns up here, actually, with insert functions at the top. Whatever works for you. There's not one right way to do it, but don't forget, you must follow the instructions. I can see in the chat box this evening, Sarah's now asking about different versions of Excel. And yes, this is something that students get very nervous about. It is well worth checking with your assessment venue which version of Excel they use on their assessment computers, because the AAT don't stipulate which version of Excel you have to do your exam on. So it might be that you've got a slightly different version. Now, Excel does get updated routinely. It doesn't change the key functionality though. You would need to check with your assessment venue. So wherever you have booked your exam, Margot, I would contact that exam venue and just ask them, can you confirm to me which version of Excel you have got installed on the machines, the computers that you use your exam to? It's life, I'm afraid. We all know that various software packages get updated and things look slightly different, but Excel has been going now for many, many years and the key functionality remains. Last thing I need to do just to keep moving on is put a heading here, flex. And so if I'm going back, it said insert a column between the budget and the actual and include a heading flexed budget. So let's just go and put in flexed budget. Now, another little tip, make sure that if you're typing headings in, that it's visible. I'm just having to widen that column please, please, please make sure that you also keep an eye on your presentation. One of the things the assessors are asked to mark you on is not just your technical ability of using Excel, but your ability to present the information in a way that it would look like you could present it at work, that this would look like something you could present. I'm a bit of a perfectionist there. I quite like, if I'm using numbers, all of my headings to be justified to the right side of the screen. So what I'm going to do is take my headings budget, flexed and actual and just make sure they are now to the right of those cells. So they're going to line up with the numbers underneath. Maybe that's going a bit far, but please, please, please just keep an eye on how this is presenting and making sure that the numbers remain visible, that any headings remain visible. So if you were asked to do a print to PDF or something, it would come out and not miss off half the text. That would look like you were a bit slapdash if you were then going to present this information to your management team, your board of directors, etc. Cool. Okay, let's go back to the task then. So we've now done D. Let's have a look at requirement E. It says calculate the flexed budget based on the production of 12,000 units and include the numbers in the relevant expense row. Right, let's have a look. So we know this budget was calculated based on 10,000 units and we need to flex it up to 12,000 units. So any of these lines that is a variable cost, am I expecting the budget number to get bigger or smaller for our flexed budget of 12,000 units? This is where you can just use a bit of common sense to check your work. If the original budget was for 10,000 and we're now flexing it up to 12,000, any that are variable costs, we're expecting these numbers to get bigger. Fantastic. And I can see the chat box lighting up with everyone saying they should be getting bigger. But be careful, which one of our costs won't increase from our original fixed budget just because we've now produced more units? The fixed cost, exactly, guys, the insurance. So I'm actually going to deal with that one first. Before I go and make a silly mistake and just get carried away, I'm going to make it clear, and I can do this with a formula, equals the 12,000 there. So all I did was click in the cell, equals, and then select the cell I want. Our insurance budget, whether it was the fixed budget of 10,000 or the flex budget of 12, is going to stay the same. A great tip from Dawn there in the chat box saying I would add the relevant units above each column. Absolutely nothing wrong with that, Dawn. So let's do it. 10,000 units is this one. 12,000 units is this one. Then it's just going to make sure that we do remember, we jog our memory. You're not going to be marked down for things like that. You're encouraged to kind of show your work and to present stuff how you would be doing it at work. So go for it. If you really wanted to, it won't work for my one roof to reference it because I've put a U at the end for units. But yes, if you wanted to, you could do. So now for all of the other costs that are variable, we've got to scale them up. Now, the way I would do that is take our equals, choose our fixed budget. So equals D6 equals the 25,000. What I need to do is divide that by 10,000 units, but multiply it back up by 12,000 units. And if I hit equals, can we see it has taken my 25,000 fixed budget and then increased it, flexed it up to the equivalent of 12,000 units. Does that make sense, everybody? Are we all happy with what I've done there to kind of show those budgeted units? Brilliant. Now, if you want to get really clever, I can use that same formula to do it for all of the subsequent rows, row 7, 8, 9 on the spreadsheet. Being careful, guys, not to do 10. So all I'm going to do is, you can see if I hover my mouse over that cell that's got my original formula in, I get a little black crosshair. it turns that symbol into that symbol. I can then select my mouse button and just drag it down. And what it's going to do is copy that formula down into all of the subsequent rows. You can certainly use the cells. If you've got the 10,000 units there, you can use that instead. Whatever works for you. The important thing is just sense check your numbers. Just have a look at those numbers and then think, right, in my head, does that make sense? If the original budget was 10,000, you all said we're expecting them to get bigger. They have got bigger, but clearly they're not going to have got as big as doubling or anything daft, because we've only gone from 10,000 up to 12,000. Could use absolute. So yeah, we could use a dollar sign. I'll touch on that, I think, later on this evening in another task. However you want to do it works for you. If it says use an absolute formula, when we're talking about an absolute formula, that's the one where we put the dollar sign into the formula that locks in a particular cell. You've got to use it then to get the credit for it. But here, the requirement just said calculate the flex budget based on the production and include the numbers in the relevant row. So we've done that, and however you've got it, doesn't matter as long as you've now got those numbers in your flex budget columns. Excellent. Right, let's keep going. So our task now says use a formula. Hasn't said which formula. So if the requirement just says use a formula, as long as you're going to use an equal something, that's absolutely fine, to calculate the variance between the fixed budget, the flex budget, and the actual cost for each line, and display in the next column. So we haven't been asked for a heading, but I think it would be nice to put a heading in. So I'm going to put variance there, and we need to work out the difference. So all I'm going to do, and it just said a vague formula, if I put in equals, select my fixed budget number, and then take away, and then click in my actual, all I'm doing is E6 minus F6, I have worked out the variance. And then I can do exactly the same, and I can copy those down so you can see the variances appearing there for each of those rows. Just, it's worth double checking, just clicking into one of those cells and making sure that it's doing E10, that's my flex budget for insurance, minus F10, that's my actual for insurance, and we can see we've got a variance of 6,000. Are we happy with that? Angela's saying in the chat box, why is it not actual less flexed? You can do it either way. Doesn't really matter. So yeah, I could have done it the other way, equals actual minus flexed. Doesn't really, oh sorry, would help if I did the right formula. Doesn't really matter because we haven't been asked to indicate whether we are talking about adverse or favorable variances. The numbers will be the same. Cool. Right. I have got answers for these, so anyone joining me live, or if you get the emails from us, I will send those out probably tomorrow, so you can have a look at the answers and kind of follow it through. Excellent. Right, so we've put in a column for the variances. And then in G, it says use a formula to calculate and display the variance as a percentage of actual. So if I go back, I've got to select my sheet E, and I need to do the variance as a percentage of actual. So to do that, I'm going to hit equals, take my variance number, and then divide it by the actual. So I'm doing, for that materials line, G6 divided by F6. And then I get a decimal. I wasn't asked for a decimal though, I was asked for a percentage. So if I right click, I get this menu appear. I can format the cells, and I can now choose the number tab and ask it to display the number in that cell as a percentage. I don't think the requirement said particularly to how many decimal places, so I'm going to leave it on the default as 2. And there we go. 45%. Yes, people in the chat box are saying there are other ways to do percentages in Excel. You can just use the percentage icon that you can see at the top here. If that works for you, that is absolutely fine. that will turn that cell also into a percentage. You will have a minus number for some variances. Remember, Cal, variances can go either way. And so here, some of these are adverse, some of them are favourable, which means some will be minus and some will be positive. Doesn't matter which way round you've done it. And so I'm now going to copy that down again. So just click in the bottom right-hand corner, and I'm going to copy that formula down, and it should give me percentages for all of those variances. Are we all happy with that? We've now got our variances expressed as a percentage of the actual. Be careful, Carl, if you just times by 100, you're not using the functionality of Excel. If they want you to use a percentage, the examiner assessor will actually look in that formula and look in here and see whether you have converted that to a percentage. So if you've just times it by 100, you'll get the right number, but it won't realize in Excel that that's now a percentage. So just watch for that one. It will drop you. And again, there are marks spread all over these. When you look at the assessors, what they actually do, and you won't ever see this for the live assessments, but their assessor sheets have got lots of things they then need to go and check for you in your spreadsheets. And so that would have just cost you a mark. You would have got the mark maybe for getting the right number, but you would have dropped a mark for not using that function within Excel. Cool. Right. Let's keep going. So it then says use a rank formula and display the rank of variance percentage from the highest to the lowest. Fantastic. Right. Now, rank is one of these that you might not have come across. If on the day of the assessment, you get some function asked for in Excel that you just can't remember, don't panic. The first thing I would say is you can actually go and look it up for yourselves in Excel. So I'm going to select in this column. This is where we're going to put the rank. It asks us use a rank formula and display the rank of percentage variances highest to lowest. So what we're actually going to do is rank, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to rank 1 to 5 here. Now, the way I'm going to do it and show you to do it, if you can't remember a formula, click on the formulas at the top and go to this magic insert function, the little FX icon that you can see there. This has got me out of trouble numerous times in Excel. And I've taught Advanced Synoptic, and I taught the spreadsheet unit before for the AAT Level 3 qualification, but I don't profess to know everything about Excel, and this little insert function is great. If there is a function you get in your exam that you can't remember what to do, how to do it, you can type it here, search for function. So I can search for rank, and then any that I've searched for when I hit return shows me here. And can we see it said selects function rank? If I select that, it now brings up this screen, which is a bit of a how-to guide if you are struggling to do it. So it's asking first for a number. It says, is the number for which you want to find the rank? Well, I want to find the rank here for this number, my minus 3.45%. That's the one I want to rank, and I'm going to rank each of them in turn. Then if I hit in the reference here, and at the bottom here, in these kind of function helps, it gives you a bit of a review of what this is now doing. It says, is an array of or a reference to a list of numbers. Right, an array is just a range of number cells within your spreadsheet. So I want to rank my H6 number in the array of H6 down to H10. I want to rank where 3.45% falls within the other percentages here. So in that reference, I'm just going to drag my mouse down and cover off all of those. So it's now going to rank it within the individual units within H6 to H10. And I'm going to hit OK. And it's ranked that as number 2. Now, I now need to do this rank in turn for each of the rows beneath. Now, I could go through that process all again for each of the individual rows of the spreadsheet, or I could use that rank formula and copy it down. But one of the problems that you'll find with copying formulas down is every time you copy it down a row, it will move the row reference down with it. So if you look here, if I just copy that one down, the formula now says in that second row, rank H7, which is fine. I now do want to rank the percentage for H7, but it's ranking it in the range H7 down to H11. And what it's done is shifted that array, that range, down one row, and would continue to do that every time I copied it down. But I still want to rank my H7 number in the array H6 to H10. So the way I can get around that, I can either manually change the formula, or I can do it like this. If I want to lock in those cells as absolute, I can put a $ in front of them within the formula. Can you see me doing that on the screen up here? I've put a $ above or in front of H and then 6, and that's locked in H6, and wherever I copy it to, it will keep H6 as the absolute. And I can also put a $ in H and in front of the 10, and it's now going to lock in that array. So it will still copy down the first cell reference because I want to rank each of these rows in turn, but I want to lock in H6 to H10 as the array that it's going to rank it in. So now if I copy those down, hurrah, I have got my rank. Does that make sense, everybody? How do we do that? Are we all good with that? Is that making sense? Quick sense check. What ranking should have done is now told me where each of these percentages fall in rank order with the other ones in this array or range. And if I go back to read my instructions, it said highest to lowest. Well, my highest percentage is positive 33.3%, and my lowest is minus 36.22%. So you can see it's ranked that as number 1, and then the next lowest is 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5. Now, when the assessors are marking your spreadsheets, what they will look for first is go into the spreadsheet, and they do see your actual spreadsheets. It's why they're uploaded. They will click in that cell and say, have they used the rank formula? They can say straight away, Ben's used rank. So I've straight away got at least 1 mark for doing it, even if the numbers had gone slightly off. So if your rank went a bit awry, you wouldn't drop all of the marks. You're better off having a go. One of my big tips is if you get asked for a function and you're really struggling, don't just leave it blank. At least use this little insert function and have something in there that shows that function, even if you've gone slightly off track. Excellent. Brilliant. So that looks promising. We've ranked 1 through 5 for the 5 percentages we've got. The final requirement, we've got another spreadsheet to look at in this session, so we'll move on, says insert a bar graph into the sheet to display the flexed budget and the actual expense of each cost line. So I need to put in a bar chart. Now I'm going to do a bar chart for the flexed budget and the actual. So if I highlight the data that I want, I can then use our chart wizard. If I go to insert, and then I have got the chance to insert a chart. And if I drop that down, it's going to give me a chart. Here we go. It said a bar chart, didn't it? So we've got a chart here that looks like a bar chart. Going to hit OK. And it's put in a chart. Now, this normally comes, if you get asked for a chart, towards the end of the assessment. At this point, you've got to be careful with time. If you've got lots of time left, you can play around with this. You might want to put in a title. You might want to label the axes, but you've got to manage your time. And tonight, no different, because we've got another spreadsheet to look at yet. And if this is the assessment, am I going to get marks for putting in a bar chart? Have I demonstrated in this spreadsheet I can put in a bar chart? I have done. Doesn't matter. At this stage, it just says insert a bar graph into the sheet. Doesn't matter whether it is vertical, horizontal. And sometimes I think students get too bogged down at this stage. If you're now going to spend another 10 minutes looking at your chart to the detriment of your second spreadsheet, you're more likely to fail the assessment. So at this stage, I would be moving on. I would say I've got a bar chart in there. If I've got time left, I can come back to it. You can always go back, but you've got to watch out. Cool. With regards to titles and labels, if they ask for them specifically, yeah, put them in because there's going to be specific marks for them. But the requirement here just said enter a bar chart. And so I'm happy that I've done that. I'm going to move on to task number 2 in a moment. Still got a few people just confused about the ranking. So if we just go back to the ranking, highest to lowest. Well, the highest number there is positive 33.3. So I've ranked that first. The negative numbers then obviously rank below the positive. So the next smallest is the minus 3.45.
Hi Ben, it's Caroline here. I've got a question on this. I guess what I think other people are getting confused on as well is that you've got the insurance, for example, which the flex budget was 12k and the actual was 18. So it should be, in my mind, the actual was worse. It's an adverse variance. So surely the percentage should be minus 33%.
Cool. Okay. So that's just the way round you've done it. Now, I don't think you're going to be marked down for that in the assessment because they didn't ask for us to say whether they were adverse or favourable. But that comes from just the way round I've done the calculation, doesn't it? So if I flip this round and say equals that one minus this one. Oh, sorry. I was meant to do it the other way, didn't I, to get it your way round? So minus the flex budget minus the actual. I end up then with that one being the positive. If I copy that down, it's going to change. And has that sorted the rank out?
Yeah, to me that looks more sensible because now you've got like where on materials where it's a favourable variance because the cost came in less than the flexed. You've got a positive number in the variance column of £1,000 favourable.
Absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. I think the big thing you need to feature there is whether I'd done it this way or the way I originally had it, I don't think I would have lost marks in the assessment. The assessors, they're more looking at your ability to use the Excel functionality. So as you can see there, I didn't actually change anything. And it's something the assessor might do is do what I did there and just flip it around and see, does the spreadsheet update? Because if I've used the right formulas, it would have sorted itself out as it has done there, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's good to have a keen eye, and I like the fact that you're thinking about it and checking your own work, and please continue to do that. And I do agree with you, actually. Looking at it now, I think this is a better way to present it, but I don't think that would have cost me marks at all in the assessment, if that makes sense, because it hasn't really changed what I've actually demonstrated within the spreadsheet itself.
Great, thank you, thanks.
Oh, but yeah, that's absolutely fine. And so, yeah, the key point is, have I used the rank function to kind of get that rank in there? Brilliant. Right. We will move on then and have a look at our second task for this evening now. So on the next tab, we have got task 2. And so it says we have got part A here, month, standard hours, and OT, which I'm presuming at this stage stands for overtime hours. Cool. We've got months of January through to June. Then we've got some standard hours, and we've also got some overtime hours that presumably people for our organisation have worked. So this time we've got them numbered, not in letters, but we can go for number 1, open a separate worksheet called labour rates. Just looking in the chat box, Angela, never apologise for asking questions. It's what I'm here to do. My job as a tutor is to kind of answer questions, so never feel ashamed or embarrassed or sorry for asking a question, because I guarantee if you're thinking it, at least another 20 people joining the session or watching at home are going to be thinking something very, very similar. Right, let's open a separate worksheet. So this time I'm going to use this little plus again, and we've got our separate worksheet inserted at the bottom. Called labour rates. If they ask you to call a worksheet something, I don't want it now called sheet number 2. I can double click in there and I can call it, was I asked to call it labour rates? I can't remember now, but let's go back and have a look. Yes, call it labour rates. Can we see that it's no longer called sheet 2? It's actually called labour rates because I've done it. Little things like that. Again, fairly simple, but that would have been another mark that the assessor can award me when he or she is reviewing the spreadsheet that I'm going to upload. It says include a heading, labour rate first 6 months, make bold and underline. So labour rate first 6 months, make bold. So I'm just going to use the bold feature icon at the top here and underline, and I've now got that there. And little things like that will go a long way to boost your marks. It's not all about the complex ranks and formulas. A lot of the marks is on some more simplistic formatting, layout stuff that you really should be looking to get. Right. Copy in the data for each, oh sorry, I'm on the wrong spreadsheet. I've gone to task 1, I want task 2. Copy across the above data. So similar, I now need to go and copy across the months, the standard hours, the overtime hours. So I'm just going to highlight all of that information. I'm going to use, I can use the icons at the top if I don't want to use the right click feature. So copy, and then I'm going to paste those in so they are now visible in my spreadsheet. Another good tip, and I haven't been doing this evening, is continually keep saving your work. At the start of the assessment, you will be given instructions to save your workbook, your whole Excel file, as something, and it will normally say save it to a folder on the desktop of the computer you're working on. Please do that. Please keep saving it. Nothing more frustrating than accidentally getting rid of something, losing work. So keep saving and be really paranoid about saving it as you're going along. Don't rely on auto save functions just in case it's not been activated on the computer that you're working on. Make sure that you keep saving your workbook as you go along. Right, we've included the heading, we've made it bold and we've underlined, we've copied across the data. We're now up to part 4. It says standard hourly rate is £8. Use a formula to calculate and display the standard labour cost each month in a separate column. So we can do that. Standard cost. And I'm going to take your guys' advice in the chat box this evening. I'm actually going to put the £8 at the top of this column. Did you notice that I made it wider so that's visible? And so now I can calculate the standard cost by multiplying our standard hours by the £8. I can do that here by saying equals the 12,000 hours, so that's in cell B6, multiplied by the £8 in cell D3. Brilliant. Who can tell me the problem if I just now go and copy down that formula? What have I got to do before I copy it down if I'm going to rely on my £8 being fixed in cell D3? Make it absolute again, guys. Exactly right in the chat box. So I don't want B6 to be absolute because I copy this down. I want it to move down into row 7, 8, 9 and so on. But I don't want it to move away from my £8. So I'm going to make D absolute by putting a $sign in front of the D, and 3 absolute by putting it in front of the 3. That's now locked in my £8 cell D3, and wherever I copy this formula to, it's going to keep that reference. So if I now copy it down, you can see it's done that. Worth double checking though, just go into a couple of these cells and make sure it's worked. So it's now doing B7 still multiplied by D3, the £8. And that looks like it's worked. I'm just going to check the bottom one as well. B11 multiplied still by D3. Are we all happy with that one? So now let's keep going. It then tells us, oh, sorry, I've gone onto the wrong spreadsheet again. It then tells us for part 5, overtime is paid at double the standard hourly rate, use a formula to calculate and display the overtime cost each month in a separate column. So I can go across here and now work out the overtime cost. Now it said I have got to do that at double the standard rate. So if I take my equals £8 and multiply that by 2, my overtime hourly rate is going to be £16 per hour. And I can do exactly the same here, say equals my overtime hours, so that's my cell reference for this row, C6, multiplied by my 16 up there in cell reference E3, press return, and I've worked out my overtime hours for January or row 6, but exactly the same logic. I need to make my E3 reference absolute, so I can now copy it down. Oh, let's just make sure I'm doing that properly. Copying it down should populate my entire column with the overtime cost. Just check it's working. Just test the bottom one, C11. So that is my 400 hours multiplied by E3, my £16. It doesn't matter where you put the columns, use a bit of initiative. And I think this is another thing that throws students off. Sometimes the instructions are a bit vague, and what they want you to do is kind of apply your own presentation and judgment. So as long as you put the columns in somewhere sensible, if they're right over in column ZZZ over here on the spreadsheet, I don't think that would get you too much credit. But as long as it's somewhere that's kind of vaguely sensible, you're going to be absolutely fine, Gina. So don't worry. Unless it says specifically put it into this cell or this column, then you should be following those instructions. Perfect. If it doesn't ask for currency, doesn't matter. If they are pounds, it doesn't hurt to have them in pounds. It might ask for you to do currency. I did put in £6, and then it automatically knew when I was multiplying by those cell references that this was still talking pounds. So that's a nice touch. Sometimes they might ask you to use currency, so you can do that by using the format cell and then the functionality to make those numbers currency. Right, let's keep going in our task. So it then says, show the total wages cost each month. So total cost, presumably, is just going to be my standard cost plus my overtime cost. So I'm just going to use a simple equals and then plus formula. So by doing D6 plus E6, I'm going to work out my cost for January in total. That one I don't need to make absolute because I want it to go down rows 7, 8, 9 and below. So I'm just going to copy that down, and hopefully you should have something that looks like that for your total costs. Are we happy with that? Brilliant. Right, let's keep going then. So now it says, use a formula to clearly identify the average standard and overtime hours per month. Well, the columns that have got hours in are this column B for the standard and this column C for the overtime. Now, average, you could simply add them up and divide by the number in that range, but Excel is much cleverer than that. We can actually use the average function within Excel to do that for us. So again, I'm going to select my box that I want to put the average in. I'm going to go to formulas up here at the top and use my trusty insert function. And I'm going to type in at the top there, average. And we see it is now in the select function found average underneath here. And so if I hit OK, it's now asking me the number. It's the number arguments which you want to average. So I want it to average for my standard everything there from January down to June. And I'm going to hit enter. And you can see it's automatically calculated the average for me. Are we happy with that? 14,000 is the average of those 6 monthly standard hours. And I can also copy that one across one column and say use the average there as well. And I'm just going to write under, or sorry, next to it, average. So I know that that's the average hours for both my standard and my overtime across those 6 months. Whilst I'm looking at my spreadsheet, I'm still thinking about presentation. I've just noticed that my column B is missing the top of that heading. So what I'm going to do is just double click it, and then it's expanded it out. So it now shows the full standard hours. Little touches like that will help you get those extra couple of assessment marks for presentation, making sure that the columns are wide enough to fit in any text so it doesn't miss and cut stuff off. Right, back to our requirements. It says next, insert a line graph showing overtime and standard labour costs for each month. Give this a title and label each axis. So standard and overtime costs, I'm going to highlight those. I'm also going to try something here and highlight the months to see if it will pick the, oh, sorry, if I do it right, if it will pick these up in the graph, in the chart that I'm going to produce. So bear with me 1 second while I just get my mouse to work for me. The problems of using a laptop, I would hope you would have a desktop mouse in your assessment that you'll be using. So I'm just going to highlight those, but also highlight my month column. All I've done there is held the control button down to highlight those 3 columns, because that's the data I want to get onto my graph: the month, the standard cost, the overtime cost. I'm then going to go up to the top here and insert. I'm going to go to charts. I'm going to try this one for a change. I'm going to hit recommended charts and see what it comes up with. And can we see, guys, that recommended chart is not cheating in the exam, but Excel is going to think, actually, Ben, I can use a bit of sense to think what you might be wanting this to look like and display. And can we see here, this looks like a line graph. So we can see, okay, it's put it in. Now, the next thing I need to do is just make sure it is not going over the top of the information I've already got. I'm probably going to place it to the side, but just make it clear that that is now nice and visible, isn't covering up any of the other numbers or work. So let's just go back to the brief. It said insert a line graph showing overtime and standard labour costs for each month. Give this a title and label the axes. So chart title, nice and easy. I'm going to call this, and here we go, I'm going to call this labour costs. We can see that it's already labelled the axes January, February, March, April, May and June. And that was my little hack, because I also highlighted those months when I then went to say insert chart. So it's done that one for me. On this side, we have got our numerical values for the pounds. So we have got labels on both of those. And therefore, I'm pretty happy at that stage. Again, I think charts is something that students kind of maybe worry too much about. I'll put in 2 C's for cost. You won't be marked down for spelling, so don't worry about that. You'll still get marks for whatever chart you put in, Sarah. So don't get overly hung up. I think too many students get really paranoid about, well, is this the specific chart? That is a line chart. It's displaying everything they want you to. Looks absolutely fine. Sarah's saying, how do you get rid of the gap between January and the vertical axis? Don't know. But to be honest, I'm not too fussed about that. In the exam, that is not going to drop me any marks. We can see where it started. I think it's probably because it's trying to pull stuff through from these months here. I guess if I delete that row, it should not try and put in a space. Haha, there we go. Can we see that that's done it? It's because there was a kind of gap at there that it was not picking up any data for. But don't get too hung up on it. I would think it's more important to make sure that you get it uploaded. Right, let's just go back to our instructions, because you've got to keep an eye on the time. You've got to make sure that this now does get uploaded. If your spreadsheets don't get uploaded, they will have nothing to assess, and sadly you won't pass the assessment. says finally, wages rates for standard and overtime are expected to increase by 5% for the next 6 months. Use a formula to identify the total expected wages costs of standard and overtime for the next 6 months. Clearly indicate this in the sheet as the next period budget information. So they haven't been specific here. You've got to think about what we are being asked to do. Let's put in next year's budget. We were told to increase by 6%. So if I take my total costs, and what I might be tempted to do is just total up my total costs for overtime. And I've also got my total costs for standard. Oh, if I copy that across, and apologies, I've just lost it. Just go back, total costs, there we go. Copy it across this way and also copy it across this way. They're my totals, and I might write in total there just so it's fully clear what I've done. I haven't been asked for this, but if I was presented it, I'd probably want those in bold so they stuck out. I could even put an underline in it to make it look like they are totals. But our budget next year is increasing those by 6%. So I'm going to do equals that. Let's try doing plus 6%, see what we get. Oh, it's given us exactly the same, so that's not working. What I might be tempted to do then is just do D11 multiplied by 1.06 to increase it by 6%. That looks like a better number. And so here we go. I have now put in my next year's budgeted figures for the 6% increase. Again, we were asked to do that. Oh, it's 5%. Sorry, I've misread the question, haven't I? Thank you. That's a case in point. If this was now the live assessment and I made a silly mistake like that, I'm not going to be penalised massively. I've still used the right kind of logic. I've just done the wrong number. So actually, it's a 5% increase. To increase those numbers by 5%, I want to multiply by 1.05 for the total. And therefore I can copy that across. So all I've done is taken my total costs for the months of January through to June and increased those total costs for the next 6 months by 5%. Are we happy with that one? Is that all good? Right. Someone's saying, can you show us an axis as in question 8? So insert a line graph over time, standard labour cost for each month, give this a title and label each axis. So we've got the labels there for January, February, March. I presume you're talking about putting in a label for the top. Let's go chart elements. Can we see here that once I go to chart elements, I've got the ability to label somewhere. Where are we going? Titles. If I go axis titles, at that point, I can put in a title. That's what they call a title. The label, I think, would actually be the numbers on the axis that we'd already got. But if you wanted to, I can put in costs there and put in a pound sign so they know it's costs. Does that make sense, guys? Is that what you wanted to show? Are we all good with that? If ever you're in trouble there, this is quite a nice little feature. If you right click on your chart and get these icons up, that little plus has got lots of other bits there. So if you wanted to label each of the individual points on the graph, if you don't want grid lines, you can get rid of the grid lines. There's lots of features there. Again, I do worry sometimes students get too hung up on those features. You've got to keep an eye on the clock. And once you've got a graph that looks presentable, I would say move on. If you've got time, you can go back, but you don't want to be running out of time having not done something like the 5% increase. Right, that's it. At that point, make sure it's saved, get it uploaded over to the AAT. The 5% formula is just a case of, if you want to increase any number by 5%, if you multiply it by 1.05, that's going to increase it by 5%. So all I've done there is taken the total standard cost for those 6 months and used the formula, multiply that total by 1.05, and that's how we would increase by 5%. I'm going to finish this evening's session there. So thank you very much for joining me. Look forward to seeing you on another one of the sessions.